Hey guys, welcome to Film Darkly. I'm your host Anthony Paceno, and today I'm going to talk about Alice, Sweet Alice. This is a film that I honestly didn't think about doing anytime soon or in general, but I was watching this video of like the top 50 best horror films you've never seen, which lists like that hardly ever count for me because I've usually almost have seen most of them. So, they're good for people who maybe haven't experienced as many horror films as someone like myself who sort of lives and breathes the horror genre and film in general. I mean, in general, I would say I've seen just a lot of movies, most people haven't, or just in general, I've seen a lot of movies. But I went ahead and checked this film out because they said it was a great movie and it had a great twist at the end that you don't see coming, which it's not really at the end. It's more like the end of the second act, if anything. So what Alice Sweet Alice is, Alice Sweet Alice is directed by Alfred Soule and written by Rosemary Ridvo and Alfred Soule. They both wrote the film. I don't think it has a different title. It came out in 1976, and it's starred... which one am I looking for? Sorry. I need to look up the actual full cast. It starred Paula Shepherd as Alice Spags, Spogs. I don't remember their last name being pronounced very often in the film. Linda Miller as Catherine, who's the mother. Mildred Clinton as Miss Trendoni. This one might be in order. It might not be giving me everything. Karen, the sister of Alice, is actually played by Brooke Shields. She's really, really young in this. Someone was saying that she got this role based off of her performance in Blue Lagoon. And it's like, no, Blue Lagoon, she's a teen or a young adult in that. In this, she's a child still. Like, this is not after Blue Lagoon. Like, I thought it was hilarious that somebody even remotely thought that. Am I going to be able to find the... I think Mildred Clinton might be the person I'm looking for. But anyhow, so Alice Sweet Alice is basically about Alice, this little girl, and her sister Karen, and basically Karen has a rough time with Alice. Alice is a bit of a bully, and they go to Catholic school together, and they're about to receive their first communion when Karen is brutally murdered, and her body is essentially burnt to death because she's not really killed at first. And she's just sort of like choked out, thrown inside this little thing and set on fire. It's really, really crazy. And the killer's wearing this mask and a yellow coat, a mask that you actually see Alice wearing early on in the film, and you see her wearing the same coat as well, the mask and the coat. So the movie kind of operates as if it's a mystery, but it's sort of like letting you know Alice is the killer. It's like Alice is the killer, and it's kind of pushing it. And there's people who kind of are of the belief that Alice is the killer. But the movie actually has a bit of a twist. And obviously, if the film is focused on Alice being the killer and it has a twist, you kind of put two and two together. But it's not what you think. And the film really has an interesting way of playing out, where you almost don't suspect who the killer is. You don't expect where the film decides to go, and the fact that it gives you the identity of the killer about, I would say after the second act, is really kind of one of the more interesting pieces to this story, because it makes the story more unique in the sense that you don't find out at the very end who the killer is. you're finding out a little earlier on, and things get really, really crazy and really, really wild. One thing I thought was really interesting is there's a character in this film, Mr. Alfonso, who is played by an actor named Alfonso Di Noble, and the dude is like unabashedly, basically a pedophile, and they do not mind depicting him that way. And I always find it so odd when you watch a lot of films in the 70s, from the 70s, you'll notice like that's a recurring theme for them to make a character who like preys on little kids. They're even like the cook in the film, what's that movie called? Sleepaway Camp. Is kind of talking about these little girls, and and all the girls in there are supposed to be around 11 or 12, and he's making like blatant sexual comments about them, and it's really kind of odd to me that was the case. Even with the original Halloween film, the boyfriend, one of the, not Jamie Lee Curtis's boyfriend, actually she don't have one in that film, but the boyfriend of one of the other girls, I don't remember who it is. It's the one who's also babysitting, who's babysitting little Timmy, and basically her boyfriend actually mentioned something about letting the little girl join in, and he's like joking, but it's so odd to hear someone joking like that back then, so it's kind of like, I almost feel like there was less of a sensitivity of talking about it more openly, and I'm not sure why. I am really not sure why, because we have more of a sensitivity now. One of the reasons people didn't like the reboot of Nightmare on Elm Street was because Freddy Krueger was more blatantly a child molester, whereas in the original we never really get told that, although it's insinuated that he was like that. This version, he's like, talking to Nancy like, you were always my favorite, my little Nancy, and he kind of makes a lot of blatantly sexual jokes. So it's interesting how a movie like that decides to do that, and so it's completely unfavorable. But films of the past that used to do the exact same thing, they were just as gross, or just as much perverted, like, got a pass. And in both cases, the characters aren't written off as good people per se, but it's interesting. You could even joke about it, like in Halloween, and nobody cares. That's just something I've noticed in all these older films I watch. I notice over and over and over again, there's sort of this like openness to talking about, that sort of thing, to talking about pedophilia, and it's really weird to me that there's an openness to that, because you would think it'd be the other way around. But at the same time, we can also look back at the 70s films and remember that, in the 60s, and remember that was the Grindhouse era, the era of ultra bloody, disgusting films that are incredibly difficult to watch because they're so full of gore and cannibalism and things like that. Like, it was very, very open to have stories of that nature. Nowadays, someone makes a cannibal movie. Part of it is, I think our effects are so much better. We can actually make it look more realistic. So there seems to be more of a apprehension to actually do films like that. And if you do films like that, you often find out that, like, people in audiences pass out. It's kind of like Hostel. People in audiences for Hostel are passing out. And I'm like, why were people passing out about this? Like, have none of you seen what's that movie called, Dead Alive by Peter Jackson? I think the other name was like Brain Dead or Brain Damage or something like that. Like, that film is exceptionally gory and gross, and I'm not talking gross in just the sense that it's gory. Like, no, it's blatantly a disgusting film. I can't even talk about half the stuff that's in it. That movie used to, like, make me feel so sick watching it because it's such grotesquely, disgusting film. It's also a comedy, so it's not really horrific. But it just does these really gross things, which, if you didn't know, Peter Jackson's early career was very a lot of films that were incredibly gross and grotesque, and not even necessarily like Evil Dead, like Sam Raimi. It's like, I can watch the Evil Dead series. I can't watch majority of Peter Jackson's films in the past. Like, they're too much. And it's not that they're too gory. It's that I can't take them serious. And then they are too gory, and they are gory, and they are gross. So it kind of gives you like a sick feeling. And they're just not, to me, they're not good either, though. Sam Raimi was actually trying to make something good. Even with Evil Dead 2, where he got a little, funny, I still think he was trying to do something good. And then with Army of Darkness, it becomes distinctly comedy at that rate. But anyhow, so I do think that's an interesting little factoid, that you often find films were bloodier and more grotesque back in the day. Movies like I Spit on Your Grave and Last House on the Left, which were actually banned from certain countries. Whereas the remakes are never banned. Very few films are banned nowadays, whereas back in the day, they were always banned. And some people might say, well, it's because they're more grotesque now. And it's like, no, they're not. They are not more grotesque at all. They are roughly the same, if not, I mean, they're roughly worse when it came to back in the day. So, anyways, I'm very much so veering off of Alice, Sweet Alice, but it's just a point I wanted to bring up with this Alfonso character. The film doesn't really focus on him, so you can't really refer to him as a villain. He's just sort of a character that's there. But him and Alice have this weird relationship where Alice almost likes picking on him, or she does like picking on him, and then he kind of picks on her back, but it has that connotation to it. Plus, he's kind of a gross guy. Like, he's not in a fat suit or something. He's just a really overweight dude who's really, like, unhealthy looking. So, anyways, I just think Alice, Sweet Alice is, the acting in it is probably one of the best parts. Linda Miller's Catherine, the mother, she really kills it. She says every line with, what's the word I'm looking for? With conviction. Like she believes in this film, and you could tell she does. Every actor in this, even Paula Shepherd, who played Alice, is really solid in this film. The dad, Dom, who's played by Niles McMaster, he's really good in this. Like, everyone's really, really good in this. The Father Tom, played by Rudolph Willrich. A lot of these actors, by the way, do not have pictures online. And the reason they don't is because a lot of them just went on to do nothing else, or if they did do something else, it was very small. But Alice, Sweet Alice is actually a film that's enriched by really good acting, a really interesting story, and an actual mysterious film. A mystery that you don't realize is a mystery. You kind of think, oh, it's a mystery to the characters, not to me. And then you kind of figure out, no, it's a mystery to you too. And it totally, like, flips you upside down where you don't see it coming. And apparently if you watch it a second time, you kind of start to see all the signs that point toward who the killer is. But which is just interesting, because it means it's really, really good filmmaking that you couldn't tell the first time around. This movie is not exceptionally bloody. It's not violent per se. But it's a really good mystery horror film. And I think it's really worth a watch. And it is a movie that not a lot of people have seen. Not a lot of people have even heard of. And I think it's a movie that everyone should, especially if you're a fan of horror. If you're a fan of horror, you should honestly check this film out, because it is a movie that does things that you don't see the horror genre doing very often. It's a smart film, and it definitely knows what it's doing in those terms. And I was really blown away by this film, because I remember thinking when I pushed play that this was going to be another one of those old 70s horror films that just had no plot and was just really stupid and silly, which is what I thought of another movie I had seen. What movie was it? It was after I had watched Alice, Sweet Alice. I went ahead and checked out another one, and it was just horrible. and it was one of those that had like a past to it where like it's known, people know of that movie, and to me there's like nothing to write home about. But Alice Sweet Alice though was a pleasant surprise, and I really do think it's worth checking out. I think I would give it at least a solid 8 out of 10. I do think it's that good of a film. I rarely rewatch films anymore, so I was going to say something about whether or not I rewatch it, but it's probably not a movie I would rewatch. Maybe someday, but I don't think I would. And really, it has nothing to do with the movie. It's just the fact that it's not that kind. Like, movies I rewatch are movies that are like highly fun and entertaining, where I don't have to think about them and I just let them play in the background. I will sometimes rewatch smarter movies, but usually it's if I'm in the process of filmmaking and I want some like inspiration and I want to be able to watch stuff that is closer to what I actually want to make. Where something like Alice Sweet Alice isn't necessarily a film I could see myself making or developing, if that makes sense. But anyhow, I guess that's gonna be it for me. So anyways, thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.